Are we ready? I think we might be ready. Yeah, let's go. If 2024 was a book, for me, it would have been The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. Now, those of you who've read that book know it's a very sad book that is mostly about grief. And sure, 2024 was a challenging year. We lost a few folks. It wasn't super easy all the time. But I've not chosen that book because my year was dominated by grief. I've chosen that book because the term magical thinking. For me, that term refers to willing something into existence, imagining an alternative future. 2024 was all about that for me. I started a new business. I launched my first album in 5 years. I willed myself over the line for my first marathon and made a number of other things happen in my life that, honestly, a few years ago, I just hadn't thought possible. So if 2024 was the year of magical thinking, then the big question for me this week has been, what's 2025? Hello, thanks for being here. So this video is going to be a little bit about 2024, but mostly about 2025. I'm going to break down every aspect of my life from career to creativity. I'm going to walk you through all of my aspirations, and I'm going to share a word, my word for the year, that will hopefully, I guess, drive me through dark times and keep me inspired through the good times. So some of you might be wondering, why now? Isn't this video coming a little bit late? January is almost over. Well, I generally find January to be a universally terrible time to do planning. We come off the back of Christmas holidays and we feel good. We set ourselves all these big goals, and then the reality of January bites. You go back to work, kids are back to school. 2 weeks in, you're completely exhausted. You've lost sight of these goals and you're really demotivated. Let's get into 2024. I'm going to be using some prompts that the framework gives me to tell you a little bit about how my year went in a non-chronological way, but really more about identifying key themes and areas. So on reflection, one of the biggest lessons I learned was I need to create more space for myself for recharging. I took myself on a trip to Vlieland last year. It's this tiny Dutch island. I went there for 3 days. It was the first time I've been away from the family since my son was born, and it was just so important to me. I did nothing really but read, write, run, eat some good food. It was just really a couple of days, but it was so recharging. It was massively important. And I need to remember to do that this year. I'm already feeling a bit tired. I was ill over Christmas. I think it's really time to make sure that I book in those types of self-care trips, but also make sure that my partner gets them too. The wisest decision I made in 2024 is easy for me. I held a birthday party. This was the first time I've done this in, honestly, maybe a decade, of asking people to come together for my birthday. Did it in person. It was just so much fun. I just got to invite loads of people from different areas of my life, people who I've known for ages, people who I've kind of just met, some folks from my professional life, some folks from my creative life, kind of smashed them all together at just a small group of people in a restaurant. It was so edifying, it was so enriching. I guess I realized how much I missed that, you know. The biggest risk I took in 2024 was probably starting this YouTube channel. Now, of course, there are people living in extreme risk all over the world, and starting a YouTube channel as a middle-aged white guy is not exactly the most daring thing in the world. But for me, struggling with issues of identity, making yourself vulnerable, these are all really crucial things for me as a person, and I think maybe for many of you too. And so starting a YouTube channel was really just getting over some serious demons that have been blockers for me for a really long time. So this was probably the biggest risk I took in terms of, if it went wrong, the potential damage I would do to my confidence, I guess. The biggest surprise of the year for me was how quickly a 2-year-old grows up. It won't be a surprise to anybody else who's a parent, but I could not believe the transition of seeing my boy go from essentially a baby to a full human being with opinions and loads of things that he needed to do, wanted to do. It's just been phenomenal, and it's such a privilege to watch that and be able to take care of him as he grows into the world. Yeah, there's nothing more rewarding than that. I always like to reflect back on what was maybe the best thing I did for other people. And I'm not sure, in my kind of community life, in my friends' life, I think I showed up for folks, but actually probably the biggest thing I did was set up my business, set up my coaching business properly. And I put out a bunch of free stuff into the world around fundraising that think helped a lot of people. The biggest thing I completed in 2024 was easily the marathon. I ran the Valencia Marathon, 4 hours, 9 minutes for anyone who cares. And I had a good training block, but I got sick a couple of weeks before, and it was really touch and go as whether I was going to run or not. But my friend Tom helped me push through. He'd give me informal training all the way through the block, and he really helped me show up on the day. And I got round and I finished it, but it was really difficult. They always say, of course, marathons are difficult. I think this one was especially difficult and challenging, but I'm so glad I did it. On the negative side, if you ask me what I was not able to accomplish, I think I was a bit disappointed I didn't get more creative writing done. I had hoped to have a draft of a novel that I'd been working on the previous year, and I don't know, I just lost momentum in January, got bored of the idea, couldn't get into a groove of my writing, and I just gave up. So it was disappointing. The thing I'm most grateful for in 2024 is those moments where I was healthy. I stayed pretty much injury-free for the whole year. I was quite ill a couple of times, and it really struck me how difficult I find that. I'm a freelancer, so I don't get paid, but I also get really depressed, and yeah, I just don't like it at all. 2024 then was a big year. It was a year of accomplishments. I'm really proud of what I did. I'm really proud of launching the business. I'm really proud of launching a new album. Really proud of finishing that marathon. Those are three just huge moments in my life that really stacked up into one year, and it was kind of remarkable that they all happened at the same time. And I think it's worth reflecting on how I created the conditions for that kind of success, if you want to call it that. I think the first thing was, as I hinted about earlier, embracing vulnerability, being prepared to maybe be wrong or fail. I also learned how to turn off the negative voice this year. Not all the time, of course. It's on right now, it always is. But I managed to turn it off or dial it down enough to get me to put the YouTube video out, to help me write a newsletter, to help me show up as a parent when I wasn't really feeling like it, to kind of be there as a husband or a friend when maybe the energy levels weren't there. And finally, I think I mixed experimentation and focus really well. I tried new things out, but I also managed to work with focus and double down on the things that were really important. And that's going to be a key motto for me this year, I think. I'm smiling because it's like a load of really nice birds just flying around outside the window. Love birds. And I suppose as I wrap up this reflection here, this little bit on 2024, I need to thank some folks as well. Obviously, my partner, Julia, has been a massive support to me all year. Of course, she always is. But also my friends, Daniel, Tom, Mick, have been helping me with creativity, fatherhood, business, running. They really showed up for me this year amongst lots of other people. 2024 reminded me that you can't do any of this without friends and without people around you who are willing to support your goals and put up with your various idiosyncrasies. So I'm very grateful for them. Okay, let's take a quick tea break while I tell you about the framework I used. It's called the Year Compass. I'll link to it below. You can download the whole framework for free. You can either fill it out digitally or on paper. I like to try and do it on paper where possible. And yeah, it's just really great. It basically takes you through reflections of 2024, the previous year, encourages you to sketch some of those out, to start quite broad and then to start narrowing things down into pockets so you can really focus on specific areas of your life and then take forward those lessons into 2025. My friend Molly shared it with me and I was really appreciative of that. Can you hear that? It's one of the downsides of living in a forestry area is that quite often you get chainsaws just starting up. So hopefully you can't hear it. Okay, let's get into 2025 and I can tell you how I'm going to use what I learned last year to plan for this year. So I have 9 areas which I'm going to share. I'm going to rattle through them pretty quickly, but I'm just going to share these 9 areas with you and a couple of goals. This is really about, I guess, accountability for me as much as anything. These are not resolutions, but let's say rules for living. So I'm not going to be setting myself, you have to do this or you failed, but really more guidelines and principles. So they're not hyper specific or anything, and they're definitely not KPI driven or metric driven, because I've decided overall this year that I'm gonna move away from target based stuff, especially around my personal life. I think the move to optimize and metricize every aspect of our life, from running to health to relationships, is just too much. And this year I'm much more interested in creating conditions for success, creating foundations for good things to happen by investing every day in small actions, intentional ways of living that allow ultimately good things to happen. I guess it's a bit like the financial advice, look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. If you can take care of the small things, then the big things will work themselves out. That's the theory, at least. So the first area is friends and community, and I want to do two things this year. One is I really want to prioritize in-person meetings with folks where I can, making quality time to see friends. The birthday party taught me so much about that last year. It's such a simple lesson, but one that's very easy to forget, especially when you live in a rural community, miles away from anywhere, miles away from your oldest and best friends. It can be challenging. The second thing this year around friends and community is that I am actually just going to make my peace with the fact that I am a remote friend for a lot of people. We moved here a couple of years ago. It's a foreign country for me. There's maybe not our kind of people in the place that we live. That's just the reality of it, but it's also fine. I'm lucky enough to have friends all over the world. I can visit almost any city and have someone to go for a coffee with. That's a real privilege, and I want to embrace that and be happy about that and just understand that that's how my life's panned out. Second area of my life then is health and fitness. I am not going to set myself any goals for running this year. The natural thing would be break 4 hours in the marathon, but instead I'm going to, and my coach Tom has helped me with this, so I'm going to set myself a goal to try and run 2,000 kilometers in total this year. The idea being that if I can get up to 30, 40 kilometers a week consistently, injury-free, then that will be the conditions of success for a quicker marathon, maybe a personal best, half marathon time, all those kind of things. But I don't want to literally put a goal in that I will, live or die by, I will fail or succeed by. Let's just focus on showing up every single week, every single run, and getting the miles done. The third area I'm focusing on then is creativity. I want to start removing a few barriers to creativity. And there are two things to that. One is practically, how can I make sure that my studio here behind me is set up well, that I have all the things that I need and want to be able to create the music that I want very easily. The other barriers, of course, are mental ones. And some of that was about because I focused so much on outputs last year, on releasing an album and the marketing around the album, word counts for the book. They ultimately ended up being quite restrictive in terms of how much I was enjoying what I did. So this year, I'm going back to creating things for the sake of creating things and having fun. I talked about this a lot in my last video, create like no one's watching. It's going to be especially true of music, writing and filmmaking this year. Speaking of which, there's a whole area of my life that I like to call learning and knowledge, which I want to think about how I'm going to operate in that space this year. And for me, I'm going to learn mostly about two things. One is about filmmaking and editing and YouTubing and just trying to learn about the basics of photography. I've never had a camera before. The second thing is then around, I'm getting increasingly interested in like radical financial systems, circular economies, ways of distributing money and resources, all of this kind of stuff. Overlaps, of course, a lot with my business, which is called Evenly Distributed for a reason. It overlaps a lot with the field of journalism, which I've worked in for 15 years. I'm especially excited about new forms of investment, microbanks, community data trusts. There's a whole world there to explore that I don't really know very much about, and I'd love to learn more. Area 4 or 5 now, is work and business. So I'm going to make a whole video about this, but this year I want to be a lot more focused. Last year was about experimentation, planting lots of seeds and seeing what grows. Now is really honing my skills and making sure that I'm focusing on what's really, really important. So I'm going to have a really tight focus this year on the coaching, on the masterclasses that I'm doing, on YouTube, and then also growing my newsletter. I guess I've got some metrics around some of those things, and I have a revenue goal, but mostly I just want to enjoy the work that I'm doing. Area number 6 is then personal life and family. I want to try to continue to be a proactive and present parent. This is something I struggled with last year. I wasn't terrible or anything, but I found it very hard to switch off, leave work, and then go and be a parent and completely leave work behind. I'm not as good at that as I should be. It's also really difficult just to parent and not stress about tidying up at the same time or trying to cook the dinner and do a million things, but really just be present for my son. He loves to learn how things work. He's exceedingly curious. I really like that about his personality, and I think I need to adopt some of that myself. The second thing in the family front is that I want to, and I stole this from my friend Daniel, just stop complaining. I find myself complaining a lot, and I'd like to stop doing that. There's no need. We're really, really lucky, And especially when you look at what's going on elsewhere in the world, we couldn't really be luckier. This is a great life to have. So yeah, I just want to be a lot more appreciative of that and stop complaining. Area number 7 of 9 then is money and finance. No real goals here. We need to reassess our savings and yeah, some of the small investments that we have. We don't have a ton of money, so it's really important to make sure that we know what we're doing and we're on top of it. Area number 8 is travel and culture. We want to plan some really bold trips this year. We had a lot of fun last year in Denmark. That was quite a spontaneous holiday, but it ended up just being so important for us. I also want to schedule some artist dates. This is this concept that every week or every couple of weeks, you take yourself on a date with yourself, essentially. And you go to either a gallery, you go on a walk, and you just use it as space for reflection and inspiration. And it's amazing how often I come back from that with new ideas for music, new concepts for my work, new business plans, even ideas for clients as well. Especially important I do that as I ramp up the coaching. Last but not least is then the kind of emotional, maybe even spiritual side of things. I'm gonna make morning pages a more regular practice for me. Morning pages is this idea where every morning you just get up and write 3 pages of whatever comes out of your brain, no filter, in order to, I guess, partly purge some of the thoughts that might be rumbling around in your head, but also just kick the brain into a point where it can actually be creative, especially with writing. And I do a lot of writing in my work, so that's really important for me. And then the second thing I'm going to do, and this is emotional, I don't know, but we are going to reduce as a family the kind of decision fatigue. We find ourselves taking a lot of decisions or discussing a lot of things and often not just putting things away. A case in point is we've been discussing for the last 2 years if we're going to move or not, and there are various things that are making that very hard at the minute. So we want to get to the point where maybe we're adopting Derek Sivers' advice, where you say to anything that comes up either hell yeah or hell no. In other words, you have to be really excited about it before you do it, or you just say no and it's a firm no, make the decision and move on. Okay, that's it. Those are my 9 areas of my life and where I want to make improvements this year. If you made it this far, you're an absolute superstar. Thank you so much. I guess this was a bit of a selfish video. I'm making it more for my own accountability, that maybe I can look back at the end of the year when I'm doing next year's year compass and see how I got on. I promised you a word of the year. I always have a word for the year. Last year it was flourish, because I had this idea that I'd been at the back of the cave for 2 years looking after a kid. We'd moved to a new country and was sort of figuring out this new business. And I wanted to kind of emerge and start to plant seeds and see what would grow. This year, I guess it's in the same vein, but I'm going to take the word create. I want to start creating more value, more joy. I obviously want to create more music and create more art. I want to create more space for myself, for my family, all of those things. I'm going to create the conditions for success. I'm not going to worry about what that looks like. I'm going to show up in the here and now and lay the foundations for good things to happen. Because if I do that, then hopefully I won't need any magical thinking this year. Thanks for watching. See you next time.